when there are AI products that are in healthcare, what makes me trust that product? One of the top three influencing factors is that there is a clinician, a doctor, a nurse at the table in the development of the product. Super, super important. Immediate trust for me. I think we're walking a dangerous line if we just say, oh, well, let's just hand it over to AI. And the reason is that the human in the loop and oversight of the human, just being like having the blended intelligence, as one of one expert has called it, is super important. Junaid, AI is a tool. We can use it for good or we can use it for not good. So yeah, there's a lot of good, but I think we have to tread carefully.
Good morning, everyone. I am very grateful today for you to join us at Signals and Symptoms podcast. And we have our good, amazing friend, Hansa. Dr. Bhargava has actually had a significant long career in basically building trust in medical literature. And she's going to help us understand in the age of AI what trust in medical literature means. So, Hansa, do you mind actually reintroducing yourself to the whole our audiences? That what's your journey been in the and how did you get to this point? And then we're going to start essentially the today's topic, which is architecturing trust in healthcare AI. And the idea is that how medical literature, which is by itself, we're going to come into it, authoritatively and everything, and discuss how we can move trust again. Because honestly, we are losing trust in AI and healthcare because of the hallucination problem. So start with your journey, and then we'll move forward.
Yeah, well, Junaid, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm a physician, just like the two of you are, and I worked in clinical medicine for a long time, over 12 years actually, in many roles, and that included ER as well as hospitalist, as well as even, helping residents, training residents as well, and a year in private practice. So I kind of took on a lot of hats at that point. I was also involved in leadership over there. And it's really interesting because some of the leadership I did was actually work on protocol committees for issues such as fever in a newborn, or concussion pathways. And so those are protocols, and protocols are essentially what algorithms are, right? So, except that, we were looking at the research and the evidence for a very long time before actually doing this. So, putting together guidelines or policy statements or protocols for hospitals takes, a couple of years sometimes, right? And now here we are at this juncture where we can do that, in a snap, as we all know, because we can get the literature immediately, especially with the generative AI tools that we're using for physicians and scientists. After that, I actually did kind of pivot to digital medicine, Junaid, and the reason I did that is because I was really frustrated with the health system as it stood. There are a lot of gaps in care. So I was fortunate to take on the role of medical director of a partnership program with WebMD and a large hospital system in the Midwest, Sanford Health, kind of looking at obesity. And we built up 3 websites. We built up an app. We built up digital tools to help patients engage where they were. So that's the problem, right? Like patients go into a doctor's office, they see the doctor for 15 minutes, and then the rest of their journey is just out there, right? Junaid, I'm going to talk a little bit about trust here. I cut my teeth as a journalist at WebMD. Trust was the essence of everything they did. And it was super important to, have that trust. As soon as you lose trust, you have nothing. And that's true of any product, any publishing piece, anything else. And so we basically made sure that we took a lot of resources. We had unbiased content, and that no matter what, whether we had partnerships with pharma or anyone else, there was a church and state. The way we built our content did not have bias. And so you can take those principles into anything today, right? And I do. Like when I write and when I produce content, when I build a product, it's super important to have authenticity and trust.
I really want to go deep with you in the sense that what is your why? I know you and I talk a lot and we have a passion for AI and healthcare, but what is your why? Why are you doing this? Why should we listen to you? So tell me.
Yeah, great question, Harvey. Look, I mean, the why is very similar to a lot of our colleagues. We actually, I'm an optimist, and I do believe that most of my colleagues, my physician colleagues, have the same why, and that is we actually want to make patient healthcare better. And how do we do that? And for me personally, it was seeing patient care having problems both as a physician, where they couldn't get access to care, or b, we were just running around seeing patients in the ER, not spending enough time with the patients because we were overloaded with EMR, or c, after the patient left the room, what happened, what was the follow-up, did they actually take the medicines? I mean, I had patients taking the wrong medicine all the time, because they just, they lost that. And D, like patient communication, like, when you give a patient a tough diagnosis, like the child in my patient room that I had to deliver the diagnosis of type 1 diabetes, or tell the parents their child had cancer, what happens? So the why is huge, right? There's a lot of whys, whether it's for the doctor or nurse or it's for the patient. We need to make a difference.
Oh my God, so much to unpack right now. So, the problem statement today is that we can see that content generation is very easy, and high quality, authenticated content is extremely hard. And then we actually call AI slop, that is extensively going through social media and everything, which again erodes trust. But then, that's the whole point of this podcast, Signals and Symptoms, that we can decrease the noise, increase the signal, and then put it back to the patient. So, first, paint the picture for our audience again, that how much true clinical research is also slop, because people don't understand that clinical research, goddamn it, is actually academicians trying to push publications so they can go from assistant professor to associate professor and everything. Before AI, the process of content generation, what you suggested, which builds trust, authenticity, etc. And then we're going to talk about AI. So, do you want to give that sort of background to the community, our audience, that how does this look?
Yeah, I do agree with you, Junaid. There is a lot of sloth out there, and it's the tough task is to kind of filter through that and make sure that at the point of the question that the right content is being generated that is actually true and fact based. And so I think it's a harder task. I know agentic AI can make a difference there. So I do think that the ones that are, medically based have probably a lot more trust in that they're only pulling from certain content. Now, to your question, Junaid, yes, they're pulling from drug resources, they're pulling from the news, the health news that's out there I mean, Healio actually. But, other organizations like Open Evidence and, all that's out there are doing a good job in that they are pulling from restricted sources, right? But I do think that there is some value to peer reviewed journals and going through the evidence and looking at the data and having that rigor. So maybe I'm an optimist, but I do think the majority of information out there from PubMed, although what you said is somewhat true, is probably good information, right?
So, first, I concur with you that definitely PubMed is better than the general internet. Unfortunately, what I'm seeing is that the more recent articles that I'm getting to review, I mean, the first step I do is actually make sure that I run it through my custom, AI, to ask them that, hey, was AI used to write this article in the first place? And then I would write to match it. And interestingly, we're seeing 60%, 70%. Again, that doesn't mean it's bad. So interestingly, that flow is going towards AI generating more research, which is, again, we are actually looking at the advent of AI being at the PhD level. Then the second part is that publishing pipelines are getting broken, but that comes to the opportunity part, because when there's a mess with the advent of AI, do you think this mess is solvable, given that we now have this new generative AI technology, large language models, etc.? They can basically go through each and every line, mark it out that this is fluff, this is not, etc.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what you say I do agree that there is definitely subjectivity, whether it's policy or whether it's publication. But I don't want to just I think that it's very it's, we're walking a dangerous line, if we just say, "Oh, well, let's just hand it over to AI." And the reason is that the human in the loop and oversight of the human just being like having the blended intelligence, as one of, one expert has called it, is super important, Junaid. But AI by itself is not something that we should also lean into. Certain AI engines are built on user engagement. The algorithms want you to come back for more, right? And so what does AI do? They say, "Oh yeah, yeah, like we're going to agree with that." A person asks a question and they want to be agreeable, because you and I both would rather hang out with somebody who's agreeable than non-agreeable, right? That's just human behavior. The second aspect is that, depending on where the AI is built and where the data is drawn from, and the data can change, right? Things change all the time. The AI can actually have that bias. So you're talking about subjective bias in publication policy. And then, of course, culture. Like, you and I are from different cultures. Yes, we're, raised here, but, that cultural influence probably has some impact on how how we interpret things. So I think it's it's a tricky line that we walk. Most of the time, it will pull in objective data, but it's super important to have the humans involved in the loop, because we just don't know. Lastly, Junaid, you probably know more about this than I do, but there could be shifts in the AI algorithms too, right? With machine learning and also with data change. But I'm just saying that we have to be aware. I am a very big AI optimist, and I believe in AI, solving a lot of issues, but we can't just hand it over.
No, no, that was never the thought in terms of that handed over. But human in loop is absolutely important in terms of trust. But the way that AI needs to function is that what I'm trying to accomplish. But the idea is that even at that point in time, for me to be provided clinical decision support, how does that actually look like? And more importantly, whoever is providing the clinical decision support, how did they make it? But what I'm saying is that we're going to talk about how the sausage is made, and I think we need to bring the AI backwards, not just the content production with trusted sources, but more importantly, bring it back to the reviewer, and the reviewer can actually review with the help of AI, constant citations, etc. The future of copyright in the age of AI is a big issue. And then lastly, Helio is amazing, and of course, I trust you, and that's where it comes. I mean, I don't trust Helio; I trust Hansa, and that's where the trust problem also impacts. So the third one is, you said human in loop, but human in trust production. How is that going to be impacting in an era of temporal shift of data, temporal shift of model, and then, of course, this onslaught of so many things?
What I was going to say is that that is another reason there needs to be human oversight and humans in development. And I talk about this a lot. Like, when there are AI products that are in healthcare, what makes me trust that product? One of the top three influencing factors is that there is a clinician, a doctor, a nurse at the table in the development of the product. Super, super important. Immediate trust for me. And investors have said, savvy investors have said, the first question I ask is, was there a doctor or a clinician, in the development of the product? If the answer is no, then I'm not investing in that product. There's so many AI healthcare products out there. Where do they fail? They fail in the implementation of it, right? And the scaling of it. You have the best shiny product out there. And then lastly, the last part of why clinicians are super important in the product cycle is that what happens after you implement it? And there's workflow. You have to have somebody monitor it, right? That's where, like, shifts can make a difference. Who's going to carry the legal risk, whether a hospital has the standard of care AI or not? Who is carrying the risk of that? So for all of those reasons, the human is the clinician that needs to be in the loop, right? And at Helio, like, as a leader at Helio, that was something that was, a very significant part of my leadership. Let's do the physician advisory board. Let's get the doctors at the table. Let's have them actually vet everything we do. Super important in any product, Junaid. Yeah.
So, Hansa, I completely agree with you. So, Hansa, last question of the day. 5 years from now, what is the biggest risk and what is the biggest opportunity you see in this space of trustworthy content becoming the baseline for clinical decision support, CDI, all of those?
I think that it's important for AI not to be completely in charge, that we need blended intelligence. We need clinicians completely involved from the very beginning to the very end, to every single day that they use the tool. Super important. I do believe, Janae, that the younger generation of doctors and nurses might be at risk, just like our kids are, for automation bias and all kinds of bias. Like, eventually the human mind says, oh, well, the AI is right most of the time, so I'll just trust it all the time.
So, you're so on point that not only future generations will have a skill gap, the current generation is de-skilling. Keep going. I'm sorry, I had to say it.
I really think it's a risk, and we need to address it now. Like, these studies are coming up, but we knew it intuitively, right? Of course, every generation is going to be de-skilled, but how do we intervene? And I think that's where that question lies with the medical schools and, the CME organizations and all of that. The second part of your question, the good is incredible. Like, AI is a tool. We can use it for good or we can use it for not good. And I think it could. So yeah, there's a lot of good, but I think we have to tread carefully. I'm sorry, that's just my nature. I mean, it's important to think before you leap.
I agree 100%. Alan, thank you for your amazing comments. I love it. You're absolutely right. At some point in time, we as physicians need to figure out what coders and coding companies are responsible for. They should become, at some point in time, liable as physicians are. You can't keep everything shooting from my shoulder and using me as a thing. And I agree with the right learned helplessness is going to be something that is going to be an issue, as Hansa said, not for physicians but everyone, as we democratize LLM usage, but more importantly, democratize and demonetize intelligence itself. What happens to my intelligence? And not only that, I am, as he correctly pointed out, learned helplessness. What happens to the generations coming forward? Because I'm stupider, clearly. No, no, I am happy to admit it.